Places like New York, San Francisco, LA, DC are out of reach.
The thing you were serving at the time was not just third place, it was second place.
We're now seeing that come full circle today and be more relevant than it's ever been.
That feels important.
It's mostly the moral burden of having mouths to feed. I think you're having a big impact on people's lives and their careers.
Welcome to episode 7 of 3 Course Founders, where we have deeper conversations with entrepreneurs who are building the future. And today, it's a fun one with my good friend, Brad Hargreaves. He is best known as the co-founder of General Assembly. It's an ed tech company that served courses across software engineering, marketing, data science, product management. And over the years, it's done so not only online, but also at physical locations, co-working spaces, and eventually at campuses that they built themselves or in partnership with Fortune 500 companies. In 2018, it was sold to Adecco Group for $413 million. And if you at all existed in the New York tech scene in the early 2010s, then you know it was one of only a handful of companies growing as rapidly as it did here on the East Coast. He then went on to found his next startup, Common, which offers co-living in apartments in a managed model. In other words, they attempt to create stress-free, inclusive, and amenity-filled living environments, helping people live in cities a little bit more cost-effectively and with a little more joy. As you can tell, he is obsessed with concepts that exist in the real world, with a real brick-and-mortar presence. And so it's not surprising that today what he's up to is building Thesis Driven, a media company that explores real estate through deep dive articles, courses, and other content that attempts to talk about what's going on in real estate, what's going on in housing, helping people understand the trends and the opportunities that exist in building in the real world. We're going to have 3 courses of fantastic conversation going into why exactly Brad is so willing to build in brick and mortar when it seems so painful. Then we'll go into mutual founder therapy, and I talk with Brad about why he's not ready to raise his next round of venture capital quite yet. And we'll talk about his strengths and weaknesses as a founder as seen by his founder friends. If you're not already subscribed, please do. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, you name it. We're probably and hopefully there. And a thank you to Grandma's Home, a new Chinese restaurant in Flatiron in New York. They were very gracious hosts and they fed us some delicious food. Check them out. All right, with that in mind, please enjoy my conversation with Brad Hargreaves. Brad Hargreaves, a friend, an entrepreneur, a New Yorker by many, many definitions. Common, General Assembly, a variety of organizations that are involved in New York and otherwise in causes that are virtuous. There's too much in the bio, so we won't do it here. We're going to dive into it. Who do you say you are when you're talking to fellow founders and trying to relate?
Well, I think if there's one common thread that ties a lot of the things I've done together, General Assembly, Common, even other things, it's this intersection of the real world, the physical world, brick and mortar, and technology.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm best known for General Assembly, which became the largest trade school in the US, teaching tech, business, and design skills. And we started that in 2010 when everyone was excited about learning code, learning design, digital skills, but also there was this...
Coding boot camps were still nascent.
Yeah, coding boot camps were very nascent. That didn't really become a thing until 2013 or so. And we had this idea that we were not only going to teach people these fundamental skills, we were going to really focus on doing it in person. So that was always a very common thread and principle for us.
Thread.
There you go, at General Assembly. And that's really tied together a lot of what I've done in my career is, General Assembly, we built 20 brick and mortar campuses, taking floors of old office buildings and turning them into learning centers, schools.
And it's important, I think, to say when you didn't need to, right?
We didn't need to.
The core innovation of those campuses to a consumer, until they probably experienced the community and experienced the physical portion of it, the value prop that you were directly smacking them in the face with was that the learning. It was the learning of vocation.
And there were plenty of people who were teaching
right.
how to code, digital skills, etc. online. But we really got far better results out of the in-person experience, and students enjoyed it a lot more. And it became a really important part of our brand. That you're not just going to get these skills on their own, but you're going to do so in a community of peers. And that's an experience a lot of people have, a lot of people want. I remember we once, back in 2011, pitched an investor on General Assembly. And we had this idea of doing these brick and mortar campuses everywhere. And the investor said, yeah, this is crazy. The future of all learning is online. And we asked him, would you ever send your kid to school online? Of course not. Of course he would. So it's a little bit of like for me and not for thee. And we really are a believer in, the importance of in-person interaction, in-person learning. And then you take that to Common, where we were building housing, where we were creating new types of residential. I mean, we saw at General Assembly the need for more affordable, the need for more accessible housing for people, not just our students coming, but also our instructors and our employees. And a lot of them would find their way into roommate situations, tiny apartments, like slumlords. And we said there's a way to do that better, to build high quality housing designed for roommates. So we became the largest manager, operator, designer of co-living spaces, so apartments designed for roommates.
Which for people who only heard of this concept through Adam Newman's We Living or whatever else, yours was a much more reasonable, you editorialize with me as much as you want. I would say it took the living portion of that far more seriously.
Right.
And that was, kind of the difference between those two. One actually kind of takes both of your concepts, General Assembly and Common, fuses them and makes it like Hello Leaf, makes it very much the whole point, the fusion of all of it, like the dormitory. Whereas you said, no, it still should be different. Right. There's still some other stuff here that is different than exactly what a college student's doing, but people need some other format.
Well, we took a fundamentally utilitarian approach to it.
Right.
Like a lot of other people getting into these kind of community-driven residential spaces, and some very, very cool and great things came out of that. But we looked at it as the fundamental challenge is affordability. How do we crack the affordability problem, provide a good value proposition for the money, as opposed to we are going to create a community, and we kind of avoided these terms of like-mindedness and things like that. It was utility first and foremost. And I think that worked well for us.
At a time when I was growing up in tech in New York, it was General Assembly. It was, I feel like Oscar Health was around in a big way as a brand. What other companies, Yelp, or was it Yelp or Foursquare? Foursquare. Like the New York ecosystem was nascent. Yeah. And so much of what I think it is today, which at this point competing with Silicon Valley in big ways and small. But back then, I feel like General Assembly, I was in your guys' spaces, not as a student or a customer, but as part of community that was happening, events that were happening, subject matter stuff that was happening. Was that intentional in terms of embracing the portions of this that are less about the students, but also what surrounds the campus, what surrounds, obviously New York is a big thing in your life. Was New York a character for you, a customer you were serving?
Absolutely. I mean, I was in the New York tech world, which was a lot smaller, as you know, and kind of more, I would almost say more centralized at the time.
Totally.
A lot of people knew each other. There were a set of events, gatherings that if you were building software, if you were raising venture in New York, you went to those gatherings, which don't really exist in the same way today.
Yeah.
So in General Assembly arose very organically from what was happening in New York tech at the time. And, it was also what was happening in the economy at the time. I mean, 2009 was not a great time to be going out looking for work. I mean, a lot of my peers had graduated from college in the years prior to that, and smart, talented people who were really struggling. And we looked at that and said, you have a lot of people who are, in a lot of ways, overeducated and underemployed that need the skills to succeed in this
almost last mile
workforce.
Delivery of them
That's really
to
what
their
it was.
purpose.
I mean, people look at, okay, you're a trade school, you're teaching people straight out of high school, it's vocational. Most people going to General Assembly, I think our average age was 24, 25. They had already gone through college, and some had gone through a graduate program, coming back and saying, I actually need that last mile, that last 3 months, that last 6 months of very skills-based training to get the job I want. And in a sense, it was democratizing what was happening in technology at the time, which was very, very insular. I talk about being centralized. I talk about everyone know each other. That's a friendly way of saying it was very insular.
Yeah, totally. How much of what you've built over the years do you either now ascribe to, then ascribe to the concept, the theories of the third place? I think we're talking about it a lot now because there's a loneliness epidemic in America. There's some of our third places like libraries, cafes, things like that have changed. People's relationship to university is even starting to change a little bit as to some people are making a value judgment as to whether college is worth it on undergrad level. But were you thinking about the concept of the third place? Is that something that you think about today?
Absolutely. I mean, we looked at General Assembly a lot as
you did,
that
actively.
third place. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we thought about that a lot at the time and how it fits into that ecosystem. And in some cases, and I think almost more relevant to today, takes the place of the second place. Because a lot of people going into General Assembly didn't have, they didn't necessarily have work.
So third place being, there's your home, your personal life, there's your second place, your work, your professional life, and the third place for, kind of from a sociological, if you want to call it that perspective, is this place where you're more in your community, you're more in this relaxed format. Again, libraries, cafes of some yesteryear, parks. Today, maybe it's Fortnite and Roblox for a certain generation. But make that point now, so to your point, like they were, the thing you were serving at the time was not just third place, it was second place.
Right, and we're now seeing that come full circle today and be more relevant than it's ever been. I mean, previously people had the home, they had work for their professional lives, and then it was really about that higher order socialization. It's about the community, it's about that third place. Well, now they don't have the second place either.
Yeah.
And Slack doesn't
Which
count.
means the missing portion of third place is even worse.
Exactly.
It's like a hierarchy of needs.
Precisely.
Wow.
So how do you not only solve for the third place, but can you solve for the second place at the same time?
Wow.
So a lot of interesting things happening right now in the built world addressing that.
So, okay, we could dive way too deep into that. So I want to zoom back out to that market insight that I want to get from you. What is different in your head? What did you know? What do you know that made you willing twice over to the very hard thing, whether we're talking about literally building these spaces and places with the General Assembly in common, raising venture capital for these businesses, going to market with what is a non-digital scale challenge that is, I think, almost always harder than if you're just, a social media or B2B SaaS play. What do you know that others don't that makes you willing to keep going to that arena? I mean, other than maybe you're a little bit insane for doing it.
It's certainly like a level of pain tolerance. I think that
which is important, by the way. I don't think that's trivial.
Totally is. There totally is.
Yeah.
Of like certainly the second time knowing it's going to be a slog,
right,
and still doing it,
and knowing some of the benefits, and that helps.
There's always a little bit of like irrational optimism that goes into it as well, and I'm as much of a victim of that as anyone. But that one of the reasons I love building in brick and mortar is it's so easy to feel the impact, to talk to the customer, to understand what the need is, what's driving that need, how the product could be better, and really iterate in place. I think that can be tough in software. I've seen so many software entrepreneurs spin their wheels building something that the market doesn't need. I think building in space holds you to a certain discipline. I mean, you can't move walls as easily as you can build a new feature. So it does force you to really understand the market need going into it and enforce some kind of discipline there.
And is there also the sense to which you think you're unlocking concepts that simply would not be good enough? Like if you went back in time, I assume you wouldn't be excited by a version of General Assembly that was digital only, and you understood something about, okay, as painful as this is the only medium in which this becomes important.
Right. Well, there's something to centering impact on the end user, impact on the customer,
right,
and having that be a driving force and having a pretty high bar there of like, it's not, oh, do they pull out their credit card and pay and not churn after 2 months? It's, do they get a job at the end of it using these skills they've learned? And if you can create that degree of transformation, there will be a reward for that. There will be a business there. And
well, the same thing in our world for agency when we're helping people with career and we're involved in a job search and the outcome is so important. You know that you've put change into someo's life in a big way when they swap jobs, when their income swaps, when you help them negotiate an offer, whatever it might be. Suddenly there's a transformation. there's no doubt that the value exchange was there. Whereas if it's like, hey, you're using this mobile app versus that mobile app, you can sometimes be confused as to whether you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're having a big impact on people's lives and their careers. And, that is like, I think a great litmus test for, do you have the core of a meaningful product? And it's very easy to measure. It's very easy to see that. And you don't have to ask yourself that in the middle of the night.
Right. Makes it a little bit easier in a weird way.
Yes.
Even though it's harder in every other way. Brad, this is a good first course. Let's make our way towards a bit of a meal, some lunch.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Let's head this way.
All right. Cool. So where are we headed?
Grandma's house.
Ooh, tell me about it.
It's my grandma's house. No, that would be in Iran.
That would be.
Brad, I'm super excited. We're at Grandma's home. This is a restaurant I've been waiting to see open, and the food is coming. Hey there.
Crispy fish, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This place has had a sense of design since they've been putting it together. There's been a sign on the front glass that told me they have an attention to detail, a sense of look and stylishness, and now we get to test the flavors of it. And we're also going to talk some mutual founder therapy, so it'll be good that we have some food to comfort us and warm us up as we do. So maybe let's begin to dig in as we talk about mutual founder therapy. Exactly. Cheers to you. The picture that I know you for, and we've talked about a little bit, is just how many times you've been through the journey, more than most. And I think for a lot of people, seeing someone do that successfully over and over, and then either decide not to do it again or make some other moves. Recently you've been working on Thesis Driven, which is more, kind of combination media company, and you might define it more for us here, but you're in between entrepreneurial moments. Again, because you've been there before, and previously you've decided to, dig into the venture ecosystem and jump right back into the pool once you were finished with a phase. Now, what decision matrix are you at? What are you thinking about? Where does Thesis Driven play in that calculus? Let me kick you off broadly, and then I'd love to dig into the weeds of that emotion and that decision for you.
Oh, it's tough, Shafin. So, last two businesses I started were venture-backed.
Yep.
General Assembly, Common. Actually, the last three. I ran a game development studio. I started in 2006.
That was venture-backed
which was also
too?
venture-backed,
Oh.
yes. So, done three venture-backed businesses in a row. And I don't have an issue with venture capital. I've had great investors through all three companies. And I've done very well in the aggregate through the three. A couple of things have just really made me think hard about whether that's what I want in my next step as well. And I'm not saying it's not, but it's a real consideration in a way that I don't think it was with some of the prior ventures. One is, I don't know how many people I want to manage. Going from General Assembly, when I left there, we had 500 people, Common 300. That's hard. Those organizations, that's hard work running a company at scale.
Yeah.
And when you take venture money, you really are going for it all. You have an obligation to your investors. That's the model.
You're saying that there's an outcome that has to be so large that to do anything else would be breaking a promise a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
At least in terms of effort.
You have to make those decisions.
Right.
And when you run into those questions of like, do I make that bet? Do I, bring on this new employee? Do I go hire a little ahead of the curve and bring on this great talent? When you're a venture-backed company, it almost always makes sense to do that. But then you look at it from a perspective of, an individual founder, both from a lifestyle perspective and frankly, a return on my own time investment perspective. It doesn't always make sense.
Right.
So when I think about what I'm doing right now, I started writing Thesis Driven about a year and a half ago. It's focused on covering topics really at the intersection of real estate, tech, cities, innovation. So we have a lot of real estate developers that are subscribers. We also have a lot of proptech founders, people who care about the future of cities, innovation, what's getting built, et cetera. And from there, we've been launching a number of other, I would say, little products. So we launched a developer database, which is the largest database of real estate developers and what they're building in the United States, but still relatively small from like a software investment perspective. We teach courses. We teach fundamentals of commercial real estate. We teach a course on capitalizing real estate development projects, and that's been a lot of fun. And I'm still the only full-time employee in the US. We have a team in the Philippines. I have a partner on the courses. So it's been great not having mouths to feed. It's been really nice.
You've essentially...
Speaking of mouths to feed.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, by the way, delicious.
Yes, it is.
You've essentially built what a lot of people are saying could be the modern version of a startup. Now, I don't think yet with Thesis Driven have this like mass scale venture IPO outcome that you're imagining. But a lot of people are talking about how 1 person, 2 person, 5 person operations can do a lot more than they used to. It's a combination of offshoring, outsourcing, and AI and automation. And to your point about potentially not wanting to make that choice again, there must be anxieties that you're also fearful of. More food's coming.
Oh, wow. What do we have here?
Thank you.
Sweet and sour pork.
Nice.
Black pepper rye.
Can I also have a Diet Coke, please? Do you have anything to drink?
I'm good with water. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Like there's stuff you're looking to avoid.
Right.
For being honest about it.
Right.
Managing people being hard, the scale, the expectations, the investor relationships. And again, for a lot of young founders, first-time founders, there's the sense to which I think it's default is this glamorous path, especially the past 5 years, we've made it glamorous to be venture-backed. We've made it glamorous to go all the way and decide to raise a big round to start your journey off. What do you think is wrong about that? And you might not be saying it's wrong in terms of like your choice now, but if you had to go back and go like, again, there's benefit to that model, and that benefit no longer is default for you so large that it outweighs the cons.
There's nothing wrong with it. This is not, first of all, a moral judgment.
Yeah, you've gone back to that well too many times, by the way.
I don't necessarily believe, I believe that I will do, in the fullness of time, another venture-back company.
Okay.
But I don't want to start from the premise that what I'm doing is venture-back.
Right.
I'm going to do a lot of things.
You're going to explore.
And if something clearly from a market size standpoint, from a capital needs standpoint, from a momentum standpoint, demands those venture dollars, so be it. So be it. But I think one problem venture has had over the past, let's say 10 years, but certainly over the past, say 2015 to 2021 time horizon, is that venture got involved in a lot of things that it had no business.
Some people would have said that, by the way, about General Assembly in common.
Absolutely. And I would say General Assembly, that probably is not a venture-backable business. We just nailed the timing. We nailed the timing. It was right when everyone wanted digital skills, and we were the leading player. And we sold that business for $412 million in 2018 to a Deco Group. It's a big staffing conglomerate. And that was why we generated a good venture return.
Right.
And it was a timing piece of just like we started in 2009 when no one was thinking about learning to code. We sold it in 2018 when that was the thing. And digital skills, particularly among the Fortune 500, people don't realize General Assembly had a very large B2B business.
Right.
A lot of the work we do is on the business side. So I think if you nail the timing, you can get some of that escape velocity from a business that maybe is on the margins of venture backability.
Do you feel like
brick and mortar is really hard to venture back? And I think a lot of people working in the real estate world, investing in the real estate world, learned that over the past 10 years.
Right. So, one of the things I'm curious about a lot of venture is reputation. Being a venture-backed founder is a thing. Yeah. You get invited to, we share investors, and so we're at the same meetings, conferences, things like that. And thank you very much. We have drinks coming our way. Awesome. Appreciate it.
Wow. Thank you.
Interesting. And for a lot of the reputation elements, you're almost past that. Like, you've gotten to the other side. Do you feel a tinge of not being venture-backed in this moment? Like, you're someone who has constantly been a venture-backed founder, and being in that whirlwind, it is a specific slipstream of people, but maybe you've done it twice, and so you don't care anymore, and that doesn't matter as much to you.
Well, there are huge benefits to being venture-backed,
yeah,
particularly for first-time founders.
Right.
It's very legitimizing.
Right.
You have access to talent that you wouldn't have not being venture-backed.
Right.
It avoids some of the thrash of managing cash flow on a regular basis, which is real if you don't have that balance sheet.
Could you do what you're doing now from that perspective if you hadn't had Common and General Assembly?
Yes and no. We don't have, we are first and foremost a media and education business, so we don't have like the cash flow problems that some other companies do, where you're buying, customers that pay back over 6, 12, 18 months.
Right.
So we don't have that kind of negative float problem. But it would have been a lot more difficult for us to build our audience if I did not already have, a reputation and, a following from my work at those two companies. That's obviously the case. But there's also all these little things, and maybe I'm just have seen this week. I was signing up for AWS. And if you are
startup credits,
oh my god! So if you're not venture backed,
which seems so trivial for a venture backed company, by the way, you're like, oh, more credits, great.
Right. So if you're not venture backed, you can get $1,000 of credits. If you are venture backed, you can get $100,000 of credits. So there's you see all these little things.
You're catered
building
to.
a bootstrapping your business that are biased toward venture and being part of this venture ecosystem. And so there's real reasons to do it and go down that path as a founder, particularly as a first-time founder building a digital business.
Let's zoom back out to your comment about managing people. I'll start by maybe doing the mutual part of this mutual founder therapy and say, like, that's something that's been, a challenge in so many ways throughout my 5 years building for agency. Second time founder, first one wasn't as successful as your first one in your journey, but still got the first licks at it. And yet still there's a phase shift in people's relationship to work during COVID that impacts, our business, and after COVID. And it's one of those things too, where the relationship between founder and employee is kind of under question. The idea of capitalism in general is kind of under question. So, all of it kind of trickles from that in some way. Unfortunately, founders don't realize how much the macro influences their team's brain. So when I hear you say that, I go, yeah, if I could, and I say this somewhat jokingly, but in some ways not, if I could go back in time and, kind of think management's the thing I want to do least, let me optimize for doing as little as possible. Let me not hire when I can. Let me hire AI where I can in the future. All of those things come to mind, and the worst or hardest moments aren't actually usually because of the market, aren't actually usually because of customers, aren't actually usually because of delivery. Or if they are, it always goes back to team. It always goes back to who's on the team, who's motivated on the team, who's doing the right thing on the team, who's causing problems on the team. When you say that's not a thing you want to do again, what emotionally comes to mind for you other than the time it takes?
So first and foremost, when I talk about not necessarily wanting to manage, or not wanting to, but just that being a much more weighty consideration, going through multiple rounds of layoffs will do that to you. It's not about, yes, management is thrashy. Yes, employees can be entitled. They can do crazy things. But it's mostly the moral burden of having mouths to feed.
Right, which you've said multiple times is really interesting, right?
That is really what it is, of well,
because even in those hard times where it is about, let's say, an employee doing something and whatever it might be, you're still, as a founder, and employees, I think, sometimes don't realize this, you're actually rooting for your team.
Yeah.
Most of the times I know it sounds crazy, more than they are, because their success
Totally.
breeds yours. You're betting on them when you hire them. You're like, it's kind of like a venture bet in a sense, like, oh, I hope so much for this person. I hope that they do well. I hope that they're happy doing well here. I hope that they stay here. I hope that I'm good enough for them. I hope that I adjust to their feedback well. I hope, though, that they see also the mission. I hope they're as empathetic and caring about our customers. So to your point, that obligation and that burden, that mouths to feed is in so many ways.
Right. Absolutely. And, we also, in common, the pandemic hit.
Right.
We were in the office 5 days a week.
Right.
People scattered to the four winds.
Right.
Now we come back, it's late 2021, early 2022, we're working in a hybrid environment. People aren't coming into the office every day. A lot of people move to deep into the suburbs or to Salt Lake City or to the West Coast or to wherever, and they can't even come in. So it's a very different environment. Hybrid is hard. You have people coming in and saying, well, I want the office environment, but I'm coming in to do Zoom calls.
Right.
Where half the people are in person, half of them are, that's not good. That's not good. So I think in some ways, the benefit of having an in-person US team has also been reduced. And that's something that's hard. That's more controversial.
You have to double down on the upsides nowadays.
Right, you have to double down on the upside.
Yeah. If you're not, like the average company is going to experience a lot more resistance for doing its sake.
Right.
Right, for being in an office's sake. And instead, it has to be that you're taking advantage. This actually in 2021, we came back to an office. I can't remember when Omicron was and all this other stuff, but it was kind of like after COVID had gone through its major phases. We bought tests and we're testing first every day, then a couple times a week. But it was during that almost post phase. Not that post means that we're even now completely past it. But, and I remember we went for a particularly large office, which we've recently actually downsized from. And it was a nice office in a lot of ways, probably nicer than we should have had at the time. A startup at the time actually probably shouldn't have had such a convenient office that looked so nice when new employees were coming to interview, that presented a certain way. Now, we did it somewhat because of events and community, but we also did it because we said, hey, let's make this an experience. Let's create a lot of space between team members, both for COVID reasons, but also to make it comfortable. And I remember when we also went through hard times from a culture perspective, though, there were even some young team members who came to me, and I particularly one said, I wonder if we shouldn't have been in an office this nice this early. And I wonder if we were in something more startup-y, would we have wanted to and shared a mission to get out, to get to the next level, to like upgrade. But we had upgraded before we had reached the milestones that would have said we should have this nice office. We were ahead of the game, or ahead of our own progress in that sense.
I'd almost take the other side of that. I think if you're going to have an office, you have to have a nice office. Now.
Do you think
it's the only way to get people in?
But you were, so, if we go back to the general assembly phase of things, that's a time when startup offices were real small. People were on top of each other. There was a real sense. I remember visiting offices in like the 2013 to 2015 period where you could not hear anything as you're doing a job interview because everybody is just like on top of everybody.
Well, I think there were also some really bad philosophies about office design that were very popular.
But do you think there's a sense
then?
to which that causes or creates this sense of shared desire to level up, to get to that next, to get to a revenue milestone or a customer milestone that says, hey, we should expand. And now that we've expanded, this is almost us embracing our progress.
I think there's a lot of things you can do to really create that shared sense of progress for employees. There's obviously like everyone should be cut in somehow on the ultimate upside, on the equity. I'm a big believer in everybody having equity upside.
Totally.
But like something like offsites. I'm also a big believer in offsites. And
a little more food coming in. Thank you very much.
Okay, nice.
It's been delicious, by the way. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Kudos to the chefs.
Very nice.
Thank you. Something like an offsite where everyone can go take 2 days, really get to know their peers in something that's part about planning, but there's also more fun elements to it, more get to know your coworkers. I think that's a big part of this too, and can even be more important than coming to an office 3 days a week and getting on Zoom calls.
Right. To wrap this course up, I'm curious if you do start another venture-backed company, which sounds like you expect to at some point, maybe. What's something that you're going to do very differently this time around compared to General Assembly, Common, the game studio? You're now a vet many times over. You're also learning how to do it a little differently with Thesis Driven. Is there something that you know you're like? I feel like every founder has that, right? If I was at day zero again, here's the big thing I would do differently. Yeah. What's yours?
So both General Assembly and Common, we raised money before we really knew what exactly we were doing and who we were as an organization. And I think that caused...
You had a problem statement? Was that...
We had a problem statement.
Right.
We kind of generally knew what we were trying to solve. And in General Assembly's case, we already had a community, but we hadn't really built out the education products that would take us to the promised land yet. I think that caused a lot of problems in both companies in terms of how we went about then building the organization and focusing more on growth, as opposed to executing on a plan that we already knew and just using the money as an accelerant.
It starts too much of a timer.
And certainly Common, we took money on day one off a deck. We had an idea.
You had the reputation, you had the connections.
To build a new kind of housing. And a company that is trying to find product market fit, that is trying to validate a concept, should not be on.
Because the money can trick you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're using it in ways where you're like, I will force the validation because now I know what I'm doing and I have the capital.
Right. It's very hard to pivot in those.
Yeah.
Like that's
right.
You have a runway, you have a cash zero date, you have a team with specific
investor
skills.
judgment.
It's less. I mean, we've had very friendly investors all throughout.
Well, I guess it does create this thing, though. Correct me if I'm wrong, too. With that runway, one of the challenges, though, is because it's not the runway itself that's the problem. It's kind of like, do people keep betting on you? What does it signal if you've taken too long or something else is happening with the business?
Exactly. So we've had great investors in all the companies I've started, and my hesitancy about some of the venture model is not because these VCs, they're terrible. It's actually the opposite. We had great investors who were very patient, very collaborative, great partners for me as we built our businesses. But the model itself, it is about you're pouring rocket fuel, you're going to the moon. It is inherent to the model. It's not about the individuals.
Love it. Let's do a little bit of eating so we can go to course 3.
Let's do it.
Two. So Brad, course 3 of 3 Course Founders is super fun because what I do is I let you introduce me to a couple of your founder friends who you tell me know you very well. And I ask them some interesting questions that fuel some of what I'm going to ask you to tell me about yourself. And we'll do a little bit of rapid fire because in addition to being a many-time startup founder, you're also a many-time human founder and you've got some kids waiting for you. So let's dive in. So any reason, by the way, you picked these particular, we won't name them, but they'll know. Any reason you picked these 3 people in particular?
So they're people I've known for a while who have been on the startup journey, and they're battle hardened. And
too.
Oh wow!
Thank you very much.
Nice. Thank you. And they get it.
They get it. And so that's the key to understanding a founder, by the way, that they're battle hardened and can empathize and understand. Yep. All right. So somebody really wants you to address housing affordability issues as part of your career. And I obviously follow you on Twitter and we've chatted and you talk a lot about proptech and real estate. What is your main thesis? Oh, and we have some sake being poured.
All right.
Thank you very much. And this is, by the way, Edwin, who's our friend here at my grandma's home, which has been, by the way, absolutely delicious. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How would you tackle this? Would you do it as a founder? Would you do it in policy? Are you planning to?
So I think housing affordability is the fundamental problem of our generation.
Mm-hmm. Ooh,
that
I'm spilling.
Home ownership is out of reach. That the most economically vibrant cities, places like New York, San Francisco, LA, DC,
right,
are out of reach.
Right.
you've never seen a time in American history where people have fled cities because it's too expensive to live there. People have gravitated to cities for economic opportunity, but they can't do it because of rent and home prices. And it's just sapping our economy and upward mobility.
What's
in the
the
United
one
States.
first thing that you as czar would do?
Well, I would say abolish zoning, but certainly upzone and dramatically allow more housing to be built. This is a self-imposed problem because we make building housing illegal in a lot of places.
Right.
And we do it in New York, we do it in San Francisco. We do it, although it's less of a problem, in a lot of cities in the Sun Belt.
Right.
And it's hard to address as a founder. I mean, we tried at Common to address it, but this is ultimately, in my view, this is a public policy problem.
Right.
This is a problem of policy that needs to be addressed at the ballot box.
So a hint at another one of your founder friends said that he was rooting for you to be Mayor Brad one day. We're going to get to that. But before we do, another one of your founder friends mentioned you use your calendar as a tool to play offense. And that was a difference between you and others, at Common in his experience. What does it mean to use your calendar to play offense?
Use my calendar. I try to be very intentional about it. I'm not 100% sure what that means.
There's another portion of this, rather than having it detract from productivity as most people find it. So clearly they find the way you used it to be different than how we all maybe feel it defensively, reactively.
Yeah, well, I've realized that in the past, my calendar has been the boss of me. And I really think that's bad. I think you should go into every week not booked up, but being able to tackle the most relevant problems of that week. I think too many people get into this habit of you have a bunch of recurring one-on-ones that eat up 40% of your time from the beginning.
Right.
You have meetings that were scheduled 4 weeks ago popping up. And by the time you get to the office on Monday morning, 80%, 90% of your time is already booked up. That's not a great way to operate, not even as a founder, as a human looking to be productive.
We're talking about your kids earlier too. It's even interesting as a method there. Rapid fire for our last few here.
Try this.
Yeah, try delicious again, as always. Clearly, as we've talked about Thesis Driven, your media and entertainment or education company, it's been an early success for you as an individual entrepreneur now, building this this new approach, not venture backed. And somebody says that one of the reasons is they see you as an incredible journalist. That's what's working for you for Thesis Driven. You're a founder. You're a technologist. How are you also a journalist? Where do you think that comes from? What do you think allowed you to succeed in these early days?
It's high praise because journalism is hard, and I don't really view myself as a journalist, but we have done some investigative work at Thesis Driven that's gone beyond kind of your normal trade press stuff. And I do that because I find it interesting. I love to write. I love to ask questions. We discovered, for example, a development that was being built outside Houston, and it had about 50,000 people already in it. Nobody in the real estate industry was really aware of this. It hadn't gained a lot of prominence, but there was this family who took a massive piece of land northeast of Houston, did a very basic kind of clearing development job, and was selling plots of land primarily to undocumented immigrants in a fairly predatory way, using high interest debt, because if you're undocumented, you can buy land, but you can't get a Fannie or Freddie mortgage. So then they were lending to them, and incredibly high foreclosure rates.
It's like paying loans.
So we did an investigative piece on that called Colony Ridge last summer, and that got me into probing a bit more, asking more questions. And that's
your understanding of all the incentives at play.
Fun. Yeah, that's been fun.
A couple last thoughts here. Brad has a truly unique taste in music. Swedish metal bands.
Yes.
Obscure historical knowledge. There wasn't really anything here. Just wanted to point it out as part of the humanity of you as we talk. Mayor of New York City is a thing. Do you think public life, being in politics and government one day, is actually part of your future?
Well, I do care a lot about policy. I do care a lot about good policy and leadership. Unfortunately, my wife and I have a murder-suicide pact if either of us choose to run for elected office.
But both of you, actually, knowing you well, I'm on this person's side for both of you. You and Amanda are very good for, I would put a lot of trust in you guys to be part of the decision-making framework.
I appreciate that. I love that somebody brought that up. I've, gotten more into politics and supporting candidates who I love and admire.
Power couple.
I've made a lot of decisions just to optimize for, we have 3 really young kids, optimize for spending a lot of time with them.
High school, that's when they won't want to spend time with you. You'll need to find new kids in the form of your citizenry.
It's a long time away.
Your constituents.
It's a long time away.
Fair enough, but Mayor Brad's going to happen. And then the last bit, just to close out here, ask Brad about his internal dialogue and little tricks for pushing through hard times. That feels important.
It's never as good as it seems, nor is it as bad. That is something I tell myself a lot. Founders, it's very easy to get sucked into the waves. Things are great, things are great, things are great. I'm going to make a lot of money. Things are going to be great. No, things are terrible, things are terrible. We got to shut it down. And just the more you can do to modulate that and to remind yourself that it's never as good as it seems, nor is it as bad, that is the path to staying sane.
So important. All right. Brad, cheers. Great conversation. Thanks for sharing your insights.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Have
you killed people?
Can't talk about that. My mic's still rolling. Always know when you're on a live mic, sure.
Are we still rolling? Good, I've got that.